Hello, welcome back to Emperor's Path. My name is SBJ and today we finally completed the loop. Hi, you joined me on a very momentous occasion today because we finally have a full loop going around the loft, or a full loop in the loft. That's probably more accurate. So, the last episode we talked about the Football Yard control board, which went down very well. Thank you very much to anybody who's liked and commented on that video. It's been such a great source of inspiration to keep moving, seeing people's positive comments on the videos and people messaging me about it. So thank you so much. The good news is that now we can run trains officially. So in today's episode, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the full circuit. I'm going to give you a little outline look at the loop. And then we're also going to talk about the section that will be done much later down the line. But then we're also going to be talking about what's coming on the bridge section as well. As well as that, we're finally going to see some trains running. Now, if you're new to the channel, this might come as a shock to you. If you're old and you're part of the old guard, this will not come as a shock to you. The first train that you're going to see running on the layout today is going to be 47612, which, if you don't know, is an intercity executive liveried Class 47, and it draws massive inspiration from my first ever train set. Now, if you're old enough in the UK, you'll know the name Woolworths, or Woolies as we call them. Slightly different to the Woolies that you get, or the Woolworths that you get in Australia. So if you're from Down Under, and I'm really sorry. Now, in the mid-90s, there was a train set that Hornby did in conjunction with Woolworths, or Woolies as we call it. And it was effectively a Hornby Class 47 Royal Mail, and it had 3 Royal Mail coaches behind it that were effectively, I think they were Mark 1 coaches, or they're supposed to be Mark 1 coaches. And you had one normal coach slapped with Royal Mail. You had one that was the brake, and you also had one that was the travelling post office, which Hornby's had for years in the range. And the idea was there was a piece of track that you put down that when the travelling mail train went over it, it opened its gates and it effectively collected the luggage. Now in the 90s, this was a big thing. Royal Mail has delivered post, or has circulated post around the country via train for quite some time. And until recently, that was still a thing. That's recently been scrapped as far as I'm aware. So the first train that we're going to be seeing running around the layout today is 47612. Now the loco is a newer Bachmann loco, but it runs beautifully, it's sound fitted. The first ever train that I do have still. It's in a box at the moment, and eventually I will put it on the wall. Now the coaches are the same coaches from that set. The big difference that you're going to see is that these aren't all red. So the coaches that came in that set were red all across the board. So they had red roofs, red ends, red sides, and then the underframes were still black. To try and make them look a little bit more realistic, what I've done in the past is I have painted the ends black, I've painted the roofs black, and it massively tones down that horrible red that they were. Now I wanted to make sure I had this still running, and out of all my rolling stock, despite how old this is, even though it's still got plastic wheels, it runs beautifully. So I'm very excited to have this running around. The loco is new, but that's because I wanted a nice DCC ready version of the loco to run. But the coaches still run brilliantly. I've put Hunt magnetic couplings on them. I've adjusted the couplings. So we're going to see that run round, and I'll see you in a sec. So there we are. We finally have trains running around the loop. Behind the curtain, I've had trains running for a while. However, I wanted to have a special moment where I shared my first train running around this loop, sort of like an iconic thing. And I hope that you appreciate that that's quite a special thing for me. So I promised at the end of the last video I was going to do a filling up the fiddle yard video. That didn't happen. That was a broken promise to all of you, so which I'm very, very sorry. Filling up the fiddle yard was a lot harder than I thought. I was trying to make it so I was trying to fit as much as I could in there, and then I found out I was putting sort of half trains in each fiddle yard line, and I didn't like that. So I'm taking some time. I've put in the full trains in there at the moment to work on and just have a play around with, and just have trains that can run. They've been testing all the different parts of the layout. There's been a few instances where I've had to trim down the point rod part of the fiddle yard, so it was sort of catching here and there along there. Let's go and have a look at the full loop in terms of after the fiddle yard, so the scenic sections, if you will. We'll go and have a look at those. So let's go have a look. Starting on the left-hand side of the loft, you've got the scenic section that effectively starts at the M27, A27 junction at Portsmouth. The idea is that the scenic break on here is going to be the motorway, or it is the first junction of the M27, last junction of the A27, however you want to look at it. But the idea is that that scenic break is where the trains go across Ports Creek Junction and then they go off, and then the option is they can either go left towards Southampton and up to Waterloo via Eastleigh, or they go right and they go up to Havant and Brighton. And if you go via Havant, you can go up to Waterloo that way. So the idea is that you're going to have a nice scenic break in the form of the motorway. That then comes on. Now, the very little bit where my NCE power cab is sat, depending on when you look at photos of it, that used to be a car park. So you used to be able to drive your car underneath what is now the motorway and park your car up there. But nowadays, that is only a walk-through, and just out of shot of what would be on the bridge would be a walkway bridge that allows you to cross over the creek. Now, I will probably model it with the idea of having that little car park in there, but we'll see. We'll see how that turns out. But moving across, we've got the creek, and as you can see, I love it. I love this piece. I love watching trains go across the board, and the sound that it generates when a train goes across there is just great. Now it looks very brown at the moment. The next stages of building up this are probably start work on the track first. So I need to add third rail to the track, which also includes adding in reed switches for that arcing flash effect, because that's something that I had on the old layout that I really loved. And having this scenic section of the layout with a lot of EMUs passing over it, I think the arcing effect will be a really good idea to have in there. We'll get ballast on the concrete sleeper sections. Now the bridge itself doesn't have any ballast on it. It is just rails on top of the bridge. We'll also put on there the reed switches so that we can have the arcing from third rail electric. And then we can start building up the areas and having the motorway scenic section. We can have the bridge on the far end being scenic sectioned. And we can just start building it up and adding lots of nice little bits on there. The promise I made to myself was that as soon as that I had a loop operating, I was going to do all of the scenics on this particular section, which is absolutely fine. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to build this area up. I'm going to get the back scene put on so that you can't see the fiddle yard and the mess behind it. And I'm going to get some lighting installed above there as well to really add to that section. Now, you might remember that the bridge that you can see on the right hand side there is the old bridge from the old layout. I cut it to shape to fit this area. Now, eventually I will probably replace that with an MDF cut bridge, or maybe a scratch built bridge, but it's almost identical to the bridge that the trains pass under at Ports Creek anyway. If you don't know, to those of you who've heard this before, sorry, to those of you who are new, that bridge is considered one of the shortest tunnels in the UK, which I think is great. Now, it used to be the Napoleonic forts that were on the north of Portsea Island, that bridge effectively going off towards Fratton, Portsmouth and Southsea, Portsmouth Harbour. But it was the old Napoleonic forts, and they effectively cut the tunnel through there. Now it's very, very short. I always thought it was a bridge, Turns out apparently it is in fact a tunnel. So the section that you haven't seen yet is on the other side of that scenic break. I wanted to have two separate sections in here so that I could effectively work on them separately. And then when I want to move to the new section, I can. So whilst we're talking about the new section, let's go have a look. So this is the section that I had no real plan for. The idea was that this was going to be a board that went from the bridge to the end of the fiddle yard and allowed me to create that loop. As I was laying it down, I was thinking about what I could put in this section. Now, I promised myself that I was going to add on an L-shaped terminus station in there. In reality, I don't think that's going to happen, especially not for a very, very long time. Not because I don't want to, but I don't think I have the space. This loft is effectively where I work as well, and that's not just my real life job, but that's also weathering and stuff like that. So I do want it to be a case of that I'm not completely taking up this loft. The loft was a big selling point of this house, but I don't want it to be a case of that you can't move for the trains. So we've sort of kept it on this side here. So you can see just on the top right there that there's actually a little drawer that I've added that's got the point switches on it. Now don't worry, it is still working, everything's fine. I've unplugged it because whenever you put the camera on it, it flashes like a mother, and I don't want to give anyone any sort of flashing problems whilst watching this video. So what you can see here is the current plan of what I want to do with this. I've had some amazing help from Danny from Various Multiple Units and from James, and I'll be honest, the inspiration for how this section looks is massively thanks to James's very, very old project of modelling Marylebone Station, or Marylebone Station. The only difference is that I've tried to make it so that it's Marylebone Station, but with two through lines rather than all terminating. So my main idea when it starts coming to scenics on here, and this will change hopefully, or it might change further down the line, but the main idea here is that this, if you've seen my old layout, it was very much based on Fratton. Now, it wasn't perfect in any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely had inspiration from it. This station is definitely going to have Fratton inspiration, but it's also going to have inspiration from Fratton, Portsmouth and Southsea, and also from Portsmouth Harbour. So let's talk about what's coming in where. So I built a Metcalfe kit bridge that was to resemble the old Fratton bridge, which is still there, just doesn't necessarily look exactly the same. And I'm still going to be using that, and I'm going to be using that as the scenic break at the end of the board. So that's going to be a footbridge that allows people to get from one side of the station to the other. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Fratton footbridge is massive, and that's because it partially goes across not just Fratton station platforms, but it also goes across the entrance to the yard. So it's quite a long footbridge for how small the station is. So I'm going to be using that as my scenic break. That's going to be the footbridge going across there, and you'll have the scenic break behind it. At the very bottom of the image that you can see, there is a crossover piece. This has taken inspiration from Portsmouth Harbour. On the entrance to Portsmouth Harbour, you go across a viaduct area that goes from Portsmouth and Southsea all the way down to what is now Gunwharf. And as you enter the station throat, it goes across a scissor crossing, which allows you to then go to one of five, I think it's 5 platforms there. I love how it looks, and I also wanted to have points that allowed me to switch the lines that I'm using if I needed to. Now, this is probably not the most operationally perfect scissor crossing, but I love how it looks. This has been constructed using medium radius Pico points and a Pico crossover, and what I've done to try and make it as best fitting to a better spacing, I think that's the right term for it. I have had to cut down parts of the points to try and get it to fit in there. So it works, there's power going across it, so that works for sure. Because I had bought secondhand points that had had their springs removed, what I've done is I have nailed the points into position for now. I've drilled the holes already underneath there so that I can put the point motors underneath. But in terms of having it so that the trains don't get caught on those points, I've put a nail in place to keep them in position for now. The other inspiration is going to be coming from Portsmouth and Southsea. So in Portsmouth and Southsea train station, if you're approaching from the north and you're heading towards Portsmouth Harbour, there's 4 platforms. There's the 2 upper platforms, but there's also 2 lower platforms. And I really like the idea of having the 2 through platforms and the 2 lower platforms. Now, because of the space that I'm working in, I wasn't able to work in having the different levels. So in a compromise, I'm having it where on this Y-shaped point that you can see here, that's going to come off and that's going to lead to 2 platforms. So I'm going to have 2 platforms that are straight through, and then I'm going to have 2 platforms that are terminating platforms. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do on this is I really like what people like Everard Junction have done, where they have a shuttle system in place, and it allows you to run some of the smaller trains and have them constantly going in and out and not having to control them. So the idea is that that point that's right at the back won't actually switch, that'll be locked in place. And then the idea will be that a train will come in on this line here, off scene, and it will go down there, stop, and then come back again. I'm going to try my hardest to fit a 3-car spacing in there, and it is possible. You've just got to try and make sure that you can do everything without ruining how the scene looks. And then there's also going to be that platform where you can see the piece of track coming off it already. That's also going to have space for at least a 3-car on there. I might be able to squeeze a 4-car, but I think to make it look more realistic, I think a 3-car is a better option. So let me know what you think on that. So yeah, it's amalgamating 3 of the Portsmouth stations, and I'm going to try and do my best to model that as best I can when it comes to it, but that is much further down the line. As I said earlier in the video, I have had a little bit of fun being able to have trains running around in the loft. There's some trains that don't necessarily work on this layout, and that's a case of me addressing what's going wrong with them. There's certain trains, for example, that can't run on the inside line but can run on the outside line, and vice versa. So I've swapped those around a little bit. I do have a massive problem in the fact that I love Class 73s, and there were so many of them that ran in Portsmouth, especially in the era that I'm modelling, and I'd like to see more of them running around. But the Dapol model is so touch and go that I do need to fit stay alives to the 2 Dapol 73s that I do have, which is a shame because they're both sound fitted, and both the models that I have, which is a repainted executive livery 73 and the Battle of Britain Network Southeast 73, they do look great running around, but they just cut out so frequently on the layout, and they're the only trains that cut out frequently on there. So that's something that I need to do. I have had a bit of fun as well running some steam on the layout. I haven't put it in the video mainly because my Mark 1 Heritage rake derails quite frequently, and when I had a look at it, their wheel spacing was a little bit off, so I need to sit down and just use my DCC Concepts wheel aligner and make sure that I can get that sorted, but that's an easy job to fix. Whilst doing this video, I've cut off the sound for the locos, not because I don't want to hear it, but I don't want to be drowned out by the sound. One thing I haven't had a chance to do is balance the sound levels on a lot of the locos. Now, my 47s and my 33s all sit at a very good level, but my Class 50 and my 273s are so loud in comparison to them, so I will have to sit down one day and just adjust the volumes via my Sprog when I get the chance. But that's something to sort of do further down the line. So I'm going to give you some running shots of some trains going around, and I'll see you guys very, very soon.